We're going to start with the written questions, and this one really is applicable. It's from Wayman Hopley from Austin, Texas, and it's about Social Security. If you are elected into office, what is your plan for Social Security?
To save it. It's going bankrupt. Oh, I'm sorry. We weren't done.
Well, it just says many students, myself included, are worried that we will pay into the system and not receive anything from it.
That's what will happen if we do nothing. Not only that, it'll help bankrupt the country as well. Here's why. Both Social Security and Medicare, at one time, they had 16 people paying in, people working, you pay in, and they had one person receiving benefits. You know what that's down to? 3 people paying in for every person getting a benefit, and soon it'll be 2 people paying in for every person. And it's their money. I mean, they paid into the system, so it's not like a benefit or anything, but it's something they've earned, something they paid into. But that's where we're headed. The numbers don't work. So that's the bad news. Here's the good news. We can save that program, and we don't have to change anything for people that are on it now or are about to retire. My mother's 85 years old. She can't go out and get a job. She can't, I mean, she's had some health issues. So she relies on Social Security and Medicare, and we can leave it exactly the way it is for her and exactly the way it is for people that are about to retire. But here's the truth, and any candidate for any office that tells you anything differently is not being honest with you. There is no way that Social Security and Medicare look the same for us as it does for our parents and grandparents. There's no way, because the money won't be there. So we're going to have to make some changes to it. And what are those changes? They're not unreasonable. I'm supposed to retire at 67 right now. Might have to retire at 68. If I was still in the Senate, I'd still be one of the youngest people there. Right? My Social Security benefits, if I've made a lot of money, if I've been financially successful, then my Social Security benefits from year to year are not going to grow as fast as they do for someone who made less money. Medicare could very well be the option of taking my Medicare money and deciding to use it to buy a private plan that I like better. We kind of have that now. It's called Medicare Advantage, but it's limited. These are not unreasonable changes for people that have 25 or 35 years to plan for it. And if we do that, we can bring our debt under control, we can save these 2 important programs, and we don't have to disrupt anything for people that are on it now. If we don't do anything, over the next 5 to 9 years, they will go into crisis, there will be a mad scramble to try to fix it, and then I can't promise you that people who have it now won't have to see dramatic changes. And then the changes I just described will be a lot more dramatic than what I just described. That's the truth. It's not a function of politics. It is a mathematical fact that we have to deal with this issue. And the fact that the people in charge of government today are doing nothing about it is generational malpractice. Because they know it will trigger a debt crisis. They know what it will do to our economy, and quite frankly, they know what it will do for your future. But they'd rather win the next election than deal with this. We can't keep doing it this way. There has to be a sense of urgency about it. And so that's why I've outlined those ideas as a way to move forward. And if we do that, we can preserve these programs. They'll be the best thing in the world. They'll just work a little differently than they work right now.
Thank you. The next question comes from Tim Daly here in Greenville, South Carolina, and it's very simple. How will you reinstill trust and integrity back into the office of president?
Well, the first part of that is understanding the office of the presidency. Let me begin by saying something that I don't think you've heard. It's been too long since we've been reminded of this. The president is not in charge of everything. Okay? The president can't do anything about concussions in football. Can't do anything about that. Presidents can't regulate fantasy football, FanDuel and DraftKings and all that. We can't solve every problem. The federal government is not the answer to every one of our problems. And we've come to a point now in this country where anytime something comes up on the news, what are you guys going to do about it? Well, a lot of issues are supposed to be solved at the state and local level, not at the federal level. And a lot of issues are supposed to be solved by us in our individual lives. We don't need government regulations. We can work these things out in society. But we've gotten to this point in this country where we think everything has to have a federal solution to it. That doesn't mean the federal government doesn't have an important role to play. So I think the first thing is to remind people that our federal government was designed to be a limited government. Not a government that's in charge of everything, but a government that's in charge of a few things and does those things well, primarily keep us safe. Now, can it help on some other issues? Absolutely. And so I think part of what are those other things? Look, I don't think free enterprise works without a safety net. Not as a way of life, but as a way to help people that have fallen on hard times to get back up and try again. And that's why I've proposed that we take all of our anti-poverty money and pool it together and don't cut it, just hand it to the states and local communities and let them design anti-poverty programs that work, that actually cure poverty. Why am I going into all these topics? Because the first thing we need is a president that speaks clearly on these issues, that doesn't come to you and say, I'm going to solve every problem in the country. There are a lot of problems in our country that need to be solved in our homes, in our communities, in our school board, in our county commission, in our state legislature, not at the federal level. And the second is a president that takes the time to explain to the American people what's before us, the challenges we face, the real challenges, not politicize them, which leads me to my third point. If I am honored with the chance to be president, I will never pitch you against other Americans. I didn't do that here today in this speech, and I will never do that. I will never ask you to give me the power to hurt one group of Americans in order to help another group of Americans. I will never tell you that your challenges are happening because someone else in this country is the cause of it. What I will tell you is the truth about things that need to be fixed, but not as a way to divide us against each other, because here's the bottom line, guys. We can't have a great America if a substantial percentage of our population feels disaffected, disenchanted, or disconnected. And so what we need from our president, our next president must be the president of the United States, not the leader of a political party alone, but someone who understands that the president has to work in the best interest of everyone, including people that don't like you, including people that tweet mean things about you, including people that will never vote for you, including people that supported the person running against you. You still have to work in their best interest. And I think over the last 7 years, increasingly, we have been told over and over again that in order for us to succeed, we must somehow take something away from some group of people in this country, and that isn't the truth. Here's why I love free enterprise. You want to tell you why I truly love free enterprise as an economic model? It is the only economic model in the history of the world where you can make poor people richer without having to make rich people poorer. It is the only economic model in the history of the world where you can help everybody get better without having to force anyone to be worse off. Every other economic model says you got to allow us to take something from someone to give it to somebody else. That's what I love about free enterprise. I think that's what defines our country. And my last point is our next president has to be someone that is honestly, truthfully, and passionately committed to equality of opportunity, to the idea that no American should be denied the opportunity to fulfill their professional aspirations simply because they were born into a family that didn't have money or born into a family that didn't have connection to power. This is an essential part of what the next president needs to fight for, because that goes to the heart and to the core of what makes us a special country.
Thank you. JP, are they saying mean things on Twitter?
Oh, no. You have some good buzz going on right now. So there have been several questions from the audience today about the Affordable Care Act. But Barbara Ryan from Florida on Twitter, actually one of your constituents, sums it up pretty well. If we repeal Obamacare, what comes next? What is the best alternative?
Well, first I would say that everybody running for president as a Republican says they're against Obamacare. I believe them. I really do. I'm the only one running for president that's ever done anything that's worked against Obamacare. For example, I don't know if you realize this, but in Obamacare there was a bailout fund. There was a pool of money set aside of taxpayer money to bail out insurance companies if they lost money on Obamacare. And it was put in, obviously, by the insurance companies working with the administration. So last year I was able to pass this law that basically said you can't use taxpayer money for that. And the result is this year the insurance companies came to the government and said, we lost $2.5 billion. Give us our taxpayer money. And they said, we can't. They passed this amendment that doesn't allow us to. And so now the insurance companies are saying, okay, then we're leaving Obamacare. And the point is, why should the taxpayer have to bail out a private company that lost money for participating in Obamacare? Now, embedded in that question is a fundamental truth. Obamacare doesn't work, but we're not going to just go back to the way things were before entirely, because that system had problems too. So let me tell you what would work better. Putting everybody in charge of their own health care decisions. And how does that work? Pretty straightforward. Every American will either have access to a refundable tax credit, or an employer is willing to give you money to spend on health insurance, and you can only spend it on health coverage. And then you can decide to use your health care money, whether it's from the tax credit or from your employer, to put together whatever combination you want to pay for health coverage. So for example, my brother-in-law, I think he's now 29, but he's single and he's healthy and he thinks he's never going to die. And so what is he probably going to do if he gets $800 a month from his employer for health coverage? He's going to take that money, he's going to fully fund a health savings account so that every couple years when he goes to an urgent care clinic, he pays out of pocket and he gets refunded for it. And then he'll buy a catastrophic hospitalization plan. I am a married father of 4 and a family of 6. I need more comprehensive coverage. And so I'm going to have to go out and find an insurance plan that covers things. But I'm going to be able to pick any insurance company I want in any state in America. And if you want to know a little bit of what that would look like, turn on television. And you're going to watch that literally every other ad is either for State Farm, Allstate, Geico, Prudential, Progressive, Liberty Mutual, The General. Who am I missing? There's somebody else. Why are these auto insurance companies all over television? They're fighting for your business. Why are they fighting for your business? Because you control your auto insurance spending. You decide what insurance company you want. And how do they compete for your business? What do they promise you? Except for Geico, that has nothing to do with, who's Flo? Is Flo with, you know the lady I'm talking? Progressive. Those commercials have nothing to do about auto insurance. But everything else, there's that one with Peter Pan. Have you seen that? It's creepy. But these ads have nothing. What are they arguing? Like the Liberty Mutual one, with the person standing in front of the Statue of Liberty. What are they saying to you? Here's what they're saying in their ads: buy our insurance. It costs less and covers more than the other people. Can you imagine if we had a country where there were hundreds of insurance companies fighting for you to hire them, with the promise that we cost less and cover more? That's what we want. But we have the only way to get there is to put you in charge of the spending, not the government and not simply your employer. And hopefully with better commercials than
We have time for just one more question. Will Tracy from Twitter asks, what do you think is the best way to improve or reform the immigration system?
Well, the immigration system has three major problems. The first is that we still have about 250,000 people a year that enter the country illegally or overstay visas. We have a legal immigration system that is completely outdated, and we have about 11 or 12 million people in this country illegally that have been here longer than a decade. And you have to deal with all three of them, all three of those problems. You cannot deal with all three of those problems all at once. The American people don't trust the federal government. They want to see you do it in steps. What are those steps? I think the key that unlocks the door to do what we need to do is to prove to the American people that illegal immigration is under control, that we've secured the southern border, that we have mandatory E-Verify, that we have a tracking system for visas. So if someone overstays, we know who they are, and they can't get a job because their name is fed into the E-Verify system. If you put those things in place, that number of people entering illegally every year will come down substantially, dramatically. And then people will say, okay, now we have confidence that the problem's not getting worse. Step two then has to be to modernize our legal immigration system. Why is it outdated? Because it is built on a system that basically says the primary criteria for coming to America permanently is whether or not you have a relative living here. In the 21st century, that can't be the primary criteria anymore, because this is a skills-based economy. So in the 21st century, we have to have a skills-based system of legal immigration. That's why it's harder for a PhD in physics to stay here than it is for someone with a brother or sister to come here. And that's why we have to modernize it. That would be step two. And I honestly believe, having been involved in this issue now for 3 years, that if we can prove to people that illegal immigration is under control, and we can modernize our legal immigration system, I think the American people are willing to be very responsible but reasonable with someone who was brought here when they were 2 years old, with someone that's been here for 15 years or 10 years and hasn't otherwise violated our laws and learns English and pays a fine for violating the law and starts paying taxes. I think people will be very reasonable about that with a work permit, and that's all they'll have for about 10 years. But I don't think you can get to that third stage until you've done these other two things. And I would add one more point. Immigration is increasingly about security, because I mentioned this to you in the outset. ISIS, as one example, has a very sophisticated understanding of our legal immigration system. It is why they deliberately are now recruiting people that fit certain profiles. People that can get a visa to be a student. People that can get a visa because they're a doctor or a scientist. Most Americans didn't even know there was such a thing as a fiancé visa until one of the two assassins and terrorists in San Bernardino, it was discovered, entered under one of those. So we're also going to have to re-examine our legal immigration system from the perspective of security. And here's what I want everyone to understand, because there's a lot of demagoguery on this stuff. It's not that we don't want to allow refugees or people like that to come into this country. The thing is, you can't allow someone in if you don't know who they are. And we just don't have enough information about people from certain parts of the world. And so think about it this way. We allow 10,000 refugees to come into the U.S., and 9,999 of them are just poor souls seeking a better life and to avoid, violence and war. But one of them is an ISIS killer. You have a problem. You have to be 100% right. And no matter how often you run them through the database, you won't find anything in many cases because we don't have a database. None of these killers in San Bernardino, they weren't on any database. It's a very complicated issue. Am I saying there's no common sense? No, of course there is. A 7-year-old orphan, a 90-year-old widow, a Chaldean priest, someone who we know about, that's one thing. There's common sense that still applies. But we have to accept that at this moment in our history, we face a very unique threat, unlike anything we've ever faced before. And we just don't have enough information to fully vet everyone. A better answer to that problem would be to allow people from that region to be able to stay in that region, ultimately by putting ISIS out of business. But in the interim, by getting countries like Saudi Arabia, a rich country, for example, to accept more refugees. How can it be that Jordan, that has an economy, just a small sliver of what the size of the Saudi Arabia economy is, has taken in 500,000 refugees and Saudi Arabia has taken in nobody? How can it be? This has to be addressed, and it'll take presidential leadership as part of that global coalition to do it. And by the way, it's better for the refugees because they get to stay closer to their ancestral land homes so that when this conflict is over, they can return and rebuild their lives. Instead of uprooting them, moving them halfway around the world into a different society and a different culture and a different country. But that will take some level of presidential leadership, and only America can convene the sort of global collective action to address an issue such as this.
Senator Rubio, we'd like to thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.